Right, so here we go. Here's how you find the different types of ghosts based on just 2 pieces of evidence for them, which you need in nightmare mode. EMF level 5 is fully half of the ghosts that have that. So that's a good one to start with. Fingerprints. So let's say you get these 2. Then you choose between a Myling and a Barkay, Goryo and Jinn. So the first thing you can rule out straight away, it can't be a Goryo in Nightmare, because a Goryo has to give you dots. So it's between a Jinn, a Barkay and Myling. A Barkay, you've got to check every single fingerprint you come across, basically. Because a Barkay will eventually leave you the 6-fingered one if you're lucky. A Barkay also has a greater chance to not leave any fingerprints than the others. So if you have seen fingerprints and then you see it touch a door and it doesn't leave fingerprints, it's more likely to be the Barkay then. The Myling is quieter during a hunt. That's very hard to hear, but you know, the more you practice it, the more you'll get used to that. So a Myling is definitely determinable by these 2 pieces of evidence. And if you rule out those 2, Goryo it can't be, then Jinn is your last option. You can test the speed of a Jinn if the breaker is on. Also, the Jinn will not turn the breaker off, so that's another thing. If the breaker has been turned off by the ghost, then you know that it's not the Jinn. So EMF level 5 and Fingerprints is actually a pretty decent combo. You should be able to guess the ghost from that. Okay, let's move on to the next one. EMF and Ghost Writing. Between a Spirit, a Myling and a Shade. You've still got the Myling thing of it being quiet during a hunt. So you can still test that. The Shade is, with the latest patch, extremely shady. It will be very, very quiet. It won't do very much. It will be less likely to hunt and so on. So basically, you have a ghost that's not doing very much. It's probably the Shade. Spirit's a bit tricky with that. Spirit can go either way. Spirit can be quiet. It can be noisy. It can be aggressive. It can be passive. It's hard to tell. One thing you can do with the Spirit is the smudge stick test. If you smudge the ghost and you get a Spirit, then it makes it not hunt for 3 minutes as opposed to the normal 90 seconds. That only is useful if you're at very low sanity though. So if you know you're at like 0 sanity, then you could try that. So that isn't too bad to tell between those 3 either. Okay. EMF and Freezing. This one's a little bit trickier because this leaves you with the Jinn, the Shade, the Oni and the Twins. So in theory, it shouldn't be too bad. In theory, this should be quite easily doable because a Shade will be very, very quiet. The Oni will be very aggressive in terms of throwing things around and ghost events and so on. Oni is something they changed in the latest patch to make it do a lot more ghost events. If you get back-to-back ghost events, it's probably the Oni. The Jinn, same as previously, it will move quickly towards you when you have the breaker on, and it will never turn the breaker off. So if the breaker gets turned off, it can't be the Jinn. And finally, the Twins is a little bit of a wild card. The Twins tends to just mess you up more than anything else, to be honest. If you do have events going off in 2 complete different locations in the house, then obviously it's got a Twins. If they happen to be in rooms next door to each other, it's, you know, take your pick then. Definitely a more difficult combination than the previous ones, that. EMF and Dots. That gives you the choice of a Wraith, Oni, Goryo, and Raiju. Now, it can be Goryo in this case because you do have dots. So, a little bit harder to test for that. However, you will only see the Goryo's dots through the monitor in the van. So, if you ever see dots in the room, then it's not the Goryo. The Oni, you've got the usual thing of doing lots of ghost events. The Wraith, you can easily test for. One of the easiest ghosts to find in the current state of the game because the Wraith will not leave footprints after it steps in salt. So just put some salt down, get a UV handy, and see if you get any footprints after it's walked in it. If you don't get any, you've probably got the Wraith. The Raiju will be very fast with more electrical equipment out there. So if you get a fast ghost, and these are your options, the other 3 aren't fast, so another way you can tell a Raiju. But you're probably more likely to get the Raiju from ruling out the other 3. Okay, moving on. EMF and Ghost Orb, Raiju or a Barkay. That one is actually extremely easy because it's got to be a Raiju because the Barkay will always leave fingerprints on Nightmare. And EMF and Spirit Box, you've got the Twins, Spirit and Wraith. You can do the Wraith test, as we just said. That'll easily tell you if it's a Wraith. The Spirit and Twins, a lot harder to choose between on those. Again, you can do the smudge stick test for the Spirit. If it stays dormant for more than 3 minutes, then it's probably the Spirit. If it hunts before 3 minutes are up, it's probably Twins. Twins, again, you can get if they happen to be 2 locations that are very far apart from each other. And if they're not, then you're kind of screwed. Okay, so that's the EMF combinations done. Next combinations, Fingerprints and Ghostwriting. This leaves you a Poltergeist, a Demon, and a Myling. Poltergeist should be very classic Poltergeisty. It should be throwing a lot of stuff around. They have really increased the chance for the Poltergeist to do that. So if it's interacting with a lot of objects in the room, then it's most likely the Poltergeist. You can put more objects in the room if it's one that doesn't have many things in there, just to test that. A Demon will be extremely aggressive. It can hunt right from 100% sanity. It's very rare that it does that, and I think that's still actually kind of broken, that hunt, if it does that hunt at 100 sanity. But it's more typical hunts start at 70 sanity, which you'll very quickly get on Nightmare. So if it hunts early out of these combinations, then it's probably the Demon. Very aggressive, will hunt a lot, will do ghost events like, yeah, bit of a mean one, the Demon. And then you've got the Myling. As we said previously with the Myling, the best way to tell that is how quiet it is during the hunt compared to other ghosts. Can be tricky because if you need to know how close it is to you when it does this, but yeah, you can tell these three apart relatively well. Okay, Fingerprints and Freezing. Demon, Hantu, Mimic, or Djinn. So, the Mimic, first of all, is quite easy to spot out of these because there will also be ghost orbs, because that's not actually evidence, so you will always get that on Nightmare. So that's the thing that tells you the Mimic. The Demon, as we said, will hunt early, will be very aggressive. The Djinn, as said on the other options, the Djinn will never turn the breaker off, so if the breaker's gone off, then it can't be a Djinn, and it will also run quite quickly towards you, but then will slow down when it gets close. Not to be confused with the Hantu, which will also run quickly when the room is cold, and of course it is a freezing temperatures ghost, so it will be cold in its room. You will see freezing breath around it. They have changed this. In the initial patch they brought this in, it was actually really good because everywhere the ghost went, you'd see the freezing breath particle effect on it. Now it does it in the freezing temperature room, so a bit harder to spot, but it is possible. You could see it, and that will tell you it's the Hantu. Right, Fingerprints and Dots. Banshee, Phantom, or Goryo. Again, it can be the Goryo, but you'll only see the dots through the monitor in the van, if it's that. The Phantom, very, very easy test for a Phantom, actually. It's one of the easier ones to find at the moment. If you take a photo of the Phantom during a ghost event, or when you summon it from the summoning circle, then the Phantom will disappear instantly, although the event will carry on. And also, during a hunt, the Phantom is... it blinks at a different speed to the ghost, so it's more invisible than it is visible. So if you only see it every 1 second out of every 3, then it's a Phantom. If it blinks much more quickly, like a normal ghost, it's not the Phantom. And basically, by ruling these two out is how you get to the Banshee. Now, the Banshee will do its usual thing of picking a target and only hunting that target until that target is dead. However, on Nightmare, it won't stop once it kills that target, so you can't really test the Banshee too easily. You could do Banshee tests in multiplayer, but you're kind of taking your life into your own hand if you try. Okay. Fingerprints and Ghost Orbs. The Banshee, exactly what we just said. The Hantu, same as previously. I'm not actually sure, because you don't get the freezing temperatures. I don't actually know if you will see the freezing breath on the Hantu. But it will be faster still in cold rooms, so there is that. The Abarche, it can be, because you've got fingerprints. So absolutely could be the Abarche, and you should see the 6-fingered fingerprints. And as I said earlier with it, the Abarche also has a chance to not leave fingerprints when it touches a door or a light switch. So if you know that there are fingerprints but didn't leave one all of a sudden, then it's probably the Abarche. And then finally for this section, Fingerprints and Spirit Box leaves you the Phantom, the Poltergeist, the Mimic. The Mimic you can tell from ghost orbs. The Poltergeist you can tell from it throwing shit around a lot. And the Phantom you can tell from taking a photo during a ghost event or during a hunt. So Fingerprints is actually a really good one to get, because if you get fingerprints, you've got a pretty good chance of finding out what the ghost is anyway. Right. Next combinations. Ghostwriting and Freezing. Demon, Revenant, or Shade. Ooh. Basically, it's a case of, is the ghost aggressive? Is it hunting early? Is it hunting frequently? Then it's a Demon. If it's not doing anything, then it's a Shade. And if it's in between those two, it's probably a Revenant. You can do a speed test for Revenant during a hunt. Just make sure you've got a smudge stick on you. But if it runs really fast when it sees you, it's Revenant. Okay. Ghostwriting and Dots. If you get those two, then you've done something wrong, because that can't be possible. So you probably didn't actually see dots. Ghostwriting and Ghost Orbs. Mare or Revenant? Mares will never turn the lights on. So if it turns a light on, then it's the Revenant. If it turns the lights off quite frequently, it's probably the Mayor, although Revenant can turn lights off. And of course, you've still got the speed test with the Revenant. The Mayor will also only hunt between under 60 sanity if you have the lights off, and 40 sanity with the lights on. So if it doesn't hunt until quite late on, and you've had the lights on, then you've probably got a Mayor as well. And Ghostwriting and Spirit Box. Spirit, Poltergeist, and Mayor. You've got the same thing with the Mayor, with the hunting and the light switching, so that's quite easy to tell. The Poltergeist, again, should be throwing a lot of objects around, so just whack loads of objects in the room with it, and you can tell if it's the Poltergeist. And if you choose between the Poltergeist and Spirit, it can be quite tricky, but the Spirit, you can do the smudge test of 3 minutes before a hunt. If it hunts quicker than 3 minutes, then it's one of the other two. Relatively harder, I think, Ghostwriting and Spirit Box to determine the goes between. Okay. Freezing and dots. Yurei or Oni? I mean, honestly, that's pretty hard. Pretty hard. I think you'd have to judge that based on the number of ghost events that happen. If you get frequent ghost events, you've probably got the Oni. If you happen to see the Yurei's ability where it drains sanity all of a sudden, quite difficult now because they've changed it so when you close just one door rather than all the doors in the room. When it used to close every door, you could spot it. Closing one door now, it basically does a ghost event without actually seeing the ghost. But yeah, I think that's quite tricky, that, if you've got freezing and dots between those two. Very tricky. Okay, freezing and ghost orbs. Revenant, Yurei, Hantu, Onryo. Probably one of the harder combinations, this. The Revenant you can tell during a hunt. If you've got a smudge stick, you can see how fast it moves at you. But beware, if the breaker is off or it's cold in the rooms or whatever, then Hantu is also possible for that. Hantu, you can see the freezing breath around him, if you're in the freezing breath room for it. Onryo and Yurei. Very tricky between those two. The Onryo won't hunt if there's multiple candles in the room. They basically act like crucifixes. So you could test for an Onryo that way. Onryo is also more likely to attack if the light source is extinguished, and it will more frequently extinguish the light source. So it will blow your lighters and your candles out. So if you get a lot of that happening, it's probably the Onryo if you've tested for speed for the other two. But honestly, quite a difficult combination with those two. And Freezing and Spirit Box. You've got Onryo, the Twins, and the Mimic. I mean, good luck with that one. Good luck with that one. The Mimic, you should see Ghost Orbs as well. So that can tell you a Mimic. There is that. Onryo and the Twins. Not much to go on between those. You can do the candle ones we just mentioned. Twins. Twins always mess me up because you are supposed to be able to find them from 2 different locations doing ghost events and interactions, but usually it just makes you think the ghost has wandered. I find any combination that gives the Twins is really difficult to tell on Nightmare. Okay. Last few combinations. We have Dots and Ghost Orbs. Banshee, Yurei, Yokai, and Raiju. Yeah, I think this is probably the hardest combination to choose between. The Yokai can hunt early. So if you get an early hunt, then it's probably the Yokai out of the 4 of them. The Yurei does its ghost event / sanity draining ability. The Banshee, really hard to tell on Nightmare. The Raiju will be fast if it has a lot of electrical components around it. So if you get a fast one out of those combinations, it's the Raiju. But otherwise, Yokai, Yurei, Banshee, yeah, that is a very tricky one. I'd say probably at that point you could do tests for the Yokai with shouting at its ghost room, but how do you know if it's actually the Yokai responding to the shouting or just ghosts in general? Yeah, very, very tricky, that combination. Possible, but very tricky. I'd probably go for determining if it's a Raiju first, to at least eliminate that one. Okay, Dots and Spirit Box. Wraith, Phantom, and Yokai. Very, very easy to tell between these. The Wraith, you can do the Wraith test with the salt and the UV and the footprints. The Phantom, you can do the test during the hunt to see how quickly it flickers, or you can take a photo of it. And the Yokai, as we just said, kind of hard. It can hunt early. If you get an early hunt, it's going to be that. More likely, though, you're just going to rule these 2 out to get the Yokai. But very, very easy combination, that. And then, finally, we've got the Ghost Orb and Spirit Box. The Mayor, the Yokai, and the Onryo. Again, a tricky one. The Onryo, you've got the candles. The Mayor, you've got the light switches. And the Yokai, you've got the speaking. But, yeah, I think that's probably quite tricky between those. You would have to be careful that you spotted it turning light switches off, I think, to rule the Mayor out. And then between the yokai and Onryo, just put candles in and see what happens, really. And that's kind of it. So there you go. That's every different combination of evidences that are possible on Nightmare Mode, the resulting ghosts that you get between them, and how you can possibly tell them apart. Some combinations are much easier than others. Some are really difficult. It mostly just comes with experience. And to be honest, on Nightmare, especially if you're playing on a small map, you can just guess because it's not worth as much as the rest of the objectives anyway. So, you know, that's the main thing, right? Getting more money. Anyway, there we go.